Welcome. You've come to the right place if you're interested in electrifying your home and looking at ways you can make your home more eco-friendly. Welcome to our Ask Sean show. And we've got Sean Armstrong, Clean Energy Champion, California Energy Commission's Clean Energy Hall of Famer as well here today. And you have your wonderful co-hosts with Climate Reality, myself. Great to see all of you. And Wayne, you want to say a quick hello from our Central Coast chapter?
Hello, everyone. I'm Wayne Morgan, and I'm really interested in electrification. I've electrified my house, and it's a necessary step to reduce our individual carbon footprint. So I'm happy to see lots of people interested in electrifying their homes.
That's true, Wayne. And I also want to pay a quick homage to Diana, who helped start this show almost 18 months ago. And she helped coin the term Ask Sean. And we ran with it. And I just wanted to share that Climate Reality San Fernando Valley was named the California Nonprofit of the Year. So Diana, thank you for everything, for making the Ask Sean show possible. And I'm so happy that Wayne stepped up to work on the show with us. We do this, it's a volunteer effort. And I want to give a great shout out to the San Diego Building Electrification Coalition tonight. They were one of our first partners and sponsors of the show. And Kelly, you want to tell us more about the coalition?
Sure. No, I really appreciate that you have started this. I think folks are really hungry for information. I think a lot of people think it's a great idea to electrify their homes, but then realize it's complicated when it's time to actually do it and potentially expensive, and they want to make sure they're really doing the right thing. So I think it's awesome that you've provided this opportunity for Sean, and to thank Sean, of course, for providing this opportunity for folks to ask questions. So just about the coalition itself, we're down, like you said, in San Diego. We have probably close to 40 groups that we work with as part of our coalition, including Redwood Energy. So they're not all local, but most of them are. And really, we try to be a very broad-based alliance of groups across the community, all working to equitably accelerate electrification. We do advocacy with local elected officials. We do outreach and education. We look to connect folks with funding and incentive information. And this is perfectly in alignment with the work that we do. So thank you again for letting us help out with this.
Always, Kelly, you've been amazing. And look at all the incredible groups, from Climate Reality to Citizens Climate Lobby. Can you name a few of those that are part of the coalition? Because it's faith, business, labor, community, environmental, justice, all of that.
Yes, and I'm very proud of how broad the coalition is. It's really organizations that don't always work together. And I think that this is a place where a lot of them can work together and have common interests. And I think it's really important to have a broad coalition to bring in a lot of disparate views where we can find a space where everyone agrees this is important to take a look at and to do equitably. So it's really a great group of folks.
It really is. And Kelly, I want to work with you somehow so we can help our contractors get more informed, get them resources and supporting, because they really are the ones that are often meeting with the homeowners and making recommendations. We do that on our show. This is something that we offer to help you get started. And we're here if you have questions along the way, for sure. But we know that contractors are key to this. And we have over a dozen shows, and many of them are on our Climate Reality YouTube channel. And so there's everything from bungalows to, 7 little 1-bedroom units that Kelly brought to us, to large homes, small homes. We have a show for renters. So please check that out. And Wayne's going to put that in the chat. And tonight, we're so happy to have Don Price here. He's going to, we're going to kind of go through his electrification goals tonight. And he has a 2-bedroom, 2-bath home here in Ventura. And Don, you want to say a quick hello to everybody and why you want to, electrify?
Yes, hello everyone. My interest in electrification is to reduce fossil fuel use. So I've been promoting electrification in existing buildings, and I feel like since I'm doing that, I should do it myself. So that's my interest.
I love it. That's how I started. That's why I started doing the Ask Sean show, because I wanted to do it myself. So, and there's so many reasons to electrify, Sean. You can always jump in, here with about saving on our electricity bills, to emissions, to our health, so many reasons. And Sean has taught me this, that, the gas that we're burning in our homes is almost like living with a smoker. And so it's really important for our own health and our children to really look at electrification. That's another reason, on top of, emissions, it's all kind of interrelated. And they've been really connecting gas stoves to childhood asthma and how it increases the frequency of asthma in children. Also, I want to share that Wendy joined us for our first few shows, and she has a great quote about the Ask Sean show, and she just was so thankful that something like this existed. She feels like she understands things much clearer. She feels like she can even tell other people what she knows. And she ended up upgrading her electric panel. She got a heat pump water heater. Here she is hugging her heat pump. And she got her tax rebates, and for her solar and electrical panels, and all that was part of what we did at the Ask Sean show. So we hope that we can help more homeowners. And Sean and Tom and the Redwood Energy team has put together a pocket guide to help you retrofit. Or if you're building a home, there's another guide for that as well. And there's guides for other multifamily housing. So please go to Redwood Energy and check out those guides, because they're super, super helpful. And as you know, there's tons of tax credits coming your way, especially for heat pumps. And the cool thing about heat pumps, I didn't know this, was they save as much energy as 6 solar panels on your roof. So, you might start with a solar panel or get an EV car, whatever. All of those steps really add up. They're also equal to planting 17 trees. And I'm happy to say here in Orange County, Irvine made history by being the first city in California to pass the building electrification ordinance for new construction. So we're really proud of that. And that's kind of sweeping the nation. I think Washington, D.C., right, Sean, also did the same thing. Many, many cities. Cities are also starting to do training programs for heat pump installers. And that's making a huge difference, because home emissions account for 31% of our entire city's emissions, at least in Philadelphia. And they even created their own heat pump lab to train contractors. And this was another great story. $1 billion day is being expected to be invested in solar in 2023. And so I'm going to really hand it over to Sean so we can talk about our first case study, and he can kind of update us on some cool electrification news. So I'll hand it over to Sean so he can share his screen, and feel free to start putting your questions in the chat. We will get to them. I love seeing them already. So many great questions already. Thank you so much. And please mute yourself for the presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions soon.
Thank you very much, Tristan. And I want to thank you, Tom Cabot, for being here and helping out. So yeah, hey y'all, please do put questions into the chat. We'll get to them all, so you won't be left hanging. So to reiterate, a lot of what I'm showing you comes out of our booklets on our website, redwoodenergy.net/research. And the better of the ones for this purpose is the Pocket Guide to All Electric Retrofits of Single-Family Homes. But there's also a recent guide there for electrifying commercial buildings and high-rises, and another one that's all the different kinds of vehicles and ways you could transport yourself: planes, trains, automobiles, bicycles, scooters, submarines, everything that moves, cranes, construction equipment. It's all their like specific guides. So if you have questions. Now, jumping in, so we're going to look at Don Price's house. It's down in Ventura, built in 1980. It doesn't have air conditioning, hence it's like 30, there's 100% heating at 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The house gets warm, but no air conditioning currently. The the basics. We have heating and cooling. We have a natural gas furnace up in the attic, a tank water heater. You'll see that in a second. A natural gas range, gas dryer. It's kind of classic. There's an EV in the driveway though. So they've got level 1 charging, which is the slower kind. You just plug into any outlet. Any outlet can provide 120 volt, 1400 to 1800 watts, level 1 charging. But that means like you're essentially charging about 3 miles of driving per hour. That's how I charge my car, and a lot of people do, but it can be fun to go faster. And on occasion, it's useful. Now, so the goals, we're going to go through getting a heat pump in that'll provide heating and cooling, the heat pump water heater in the garage, the induction stove, the heat pump dryers, get to level 2 charging, put some insulation in the attic, and we'll talk a little about solar. Now, it's best to start off with your budget. How much power do you have to your house? Since 1962, all houses in the United States have been required to have 100 amps. And this house has 100 amps. This is the main right here. Tom taught me that this is called center main, because usually you'd find the main at the top or maybe at the bottom, the main circuit, but it says 100 amps. That's what we got, just like everybody else. And then some of these arrows here just illustrating that like there's a dryer that the dryer plug is not being used. So that's space and power, both. But there's also just space, these blanks up here at the top. And then there's some power and some space on the patio here at the bottom, which apparently isn't being used. So this is not a problem house. This is an easy house. Just putting that out there. Now, digging in, here's our gas water heater. It's a 40-gallon tank. It's there in the garage. Great location for a heat pump water heater. They work almost ideally in garages. Here's that dryer we're talking about. And you can see there's a 240 volt, 30 amp plug, which is a lot of power, right behind it, so that if they wanted to, they could plug in an electric resistance dryer. And in the United States, the single most likely electric appliance people will have is an electric dryer. They're extremely common. Like upward of 3/4 of households have electric dryers in our country. California being one of the most gasified states in the United States, with only 8% all electric construction, which is literally at the bottom. That's almost the worst. Worse is 7%, I think, in New York, but like good is 77% in Florida. A lot of people live in Florida. So when Californians are like, oh, people cook on gas, or people cook on electricity, because about 62% of all the stoves in our country are electric stoves. So anyway, here they have the gas stove. We can get rid of that. Up in the attic, here's what a gas furnace looks like, this gas burning box, and you can see some ductwork popping off of it. Here's their car. And just noting here that I learned about this in our pre-setup. I hadn't seen this attachment before, but this plugs into where you plug the car charger, right? This is an attachment that you plug that in. Now you can pull electricity out of your car. Hyundai, Nissan Leafs, so the Hyundai Ioniq 5, Nissan Leafs, Ford F-150s, pretty much all manufactured EVs by 2025 will have specific capabilities and a warranty to match that would allow you to pull power out of the car. All the manufacturers have announced it. In 2023 is obviously Ford, but then you have like BMW and Mercedes, and just go down all the list, GM, Ford. All the EV models are supposed to be vehicle to house, where you can pull electricity out of the car should you need it during an emergency. So this car does too. It's in the driveway. And the amount of electricity that you could pull out of this car with this attachment is equivalent to just one outlet in your house. But you could put a plug strip on this and use the power of one outlet in your house. Up on the roof, this is the house here on the corner. And just knowing they're going to try to put a solar array up. Right now, this is a sort of a trial design at 4,000. Well, it should be 4 kW, not 4,000. 4 kW. Now, this is their utility bill information. So the total kilowatt hours is the number I'm looking at over a year. And go down and it says 3,000 933 total kilowatt hours. 1 kilowatt up on the roof, which might take 60, 70 square feet of the roof, 1 kilowatt in Ventura produces 1,500 to 1,600 kilowatt hours in a year. So this house needs about 2.5, maybe a little more or less, 2.5 to offset its existing electricity bill. Then here's the gas. There's a total of 119 therms of gas that's used. The way to do that conversion, I'm going to type it into the chat for folks here. We're just going to do this together for the most briefest of moments. I'm going to put 119 119 therms times 29.3, right? That's our first step. That converts the therms into kilowatt hours. Now I'm going to take that number and I'm going to say, you know, all these gas devices at best, they're only getting 80% of the energy into what they're doing. The gas furnace, the gas water heater, they're at best 80% efficient. So I'm going to say, I'm going to multiply that number, 119 times 29.3 times 0.8. That's an important one, to say only 80% of it's being used. Now, after I've multiplied it by 0.8, so I got the 80% of the energy is actually what's being used, and now the final step is to divide that number by 3, which represents the efficiency of the heat pump, where 1 unit of electricity goes in and 3 units come out. So I'm going to do divide by 3. That gets us to about 930 kilowatt hours. That's the equivalent electricity for this house that the heat pumps that we're going to put in are going to use. So that's great. This house is a fairly frugal house. You could have significantly more gas used in other parts of the state, or even in a different household in which there's lots of people doing lots of things. So 930 kilowatt hours, and you'd add that to this previous one of, I had the number up there wrong because I was using it at the off peak, but it's 3,933. So 3,933 plus 930, which let's just call it 4,000 kilowatt hours. That 4,000 kilowatt hours is the number we want. And 4,000 kilowatt hours is about 3 kilowatts of solar up on the roof. Would get this house 100% offset. For driving, though, you have to think about how much you drive in a year. Because if you're trying to do a solar offset also for your car, which I encourage, Don, do you know about how much you drive in a year?
I haven't driven that much yet, but it looks like it's going to be fairly low.
Okay.
You know,
so
300 or
is low
400
like,
miles a month.
say again?
300 or 400 miles a month.
Okay. So if you was 400 miles in a month, 12 months in a year, that's about 5,000 miles in a year. Okay. So
Yeah.
1 kilowatt hour of electricity goes about 3 miles, 3.3 miles. So to figure out how much electricity your car is going to use, let's take 4,000 and let's divide it by 3.3. Does anyone have a calculator handy to do this with us? I'm trying to get my calculator up here, but there it is. I'm going to take that, clear it out. I'm going to say 4,000 divided by 3.3. See, it wasn't a 0.3. Okay, so 1,212. I said before that at 1 kilowatt, about 60, 70 square feet of panels up on the roof, 1 kilowatt produces about 1,500 to 1,600 kilowatt hours in a year in Ventura. And there's 1,200 kilowatt hours that Don's using driving this car around for a year. So he needs about 3/4 of a kilowatt just for the car. Call it 1 kilowatt. Give him a little bit of an allowance. Okay, so now we're at approximately 3.5 plus 1, 4.5 kilowatts of solar up on the roof to offset his car and his post-retrofit house. Now, I'm going to start getting into some of my recommendations, having gone through the house, talked through it a little bit. If I get repetitive, it's on purpose, because I know that people usually need to hear things a couple of times to absorb it. Now, what we're trying to do is help Don avoid going through a service upgrade, which is a new blue wire. You're looking at this illustration. The blue wire is called a service. It provides electrical service to your house. It is a certain thickness so that it doesn't catch on fire. And that thickness is then, it's for enough for 100 amps to go through it. That thickness of copper, 100 amps of electricity could come zooming through it all at once and it would not catch on fire. But say 150 or 170 that was coming through that same wire, it could catch on fire. So in order for safety, if you're using more than hypothetically 100 amps on your house, you're supposed to then get a bigger wire for safety. But a bigger wire costs $2,500 minimum. There's no way that it gets less than that. But it goes up from there, up to $30,000. And most people are in the range of $4,000, $7,000. It's going to be expensive. And so there's strategies that are just simple and easy that we're going to use to avoid that. Oh, and also it takes forever. The process takes about 18 months. We got, oh, thanks, Tom, for getting that math in there. So to avoid the delay, to avoid the expense, I'm going to just sort of walk through it. And Don doesn't need to do it. Really, no house does. That's why they created a code that requires 100 amps, is because that's enough. But often electricians will, quote unquote, do you a favor and say, you need a service upgrade. I'm doing you a solid here. It'll only cost you for this favor $2,500 to $30,000. You're supposed to thank them for that. Okay, so starting off, I'm encouraging Don to not use that plug that we saw for the dryer. That's a 30 amp 240 volt, which totals out to 7,200 watts. It is a very energy intensive thing to do, to dry laundry as fast and as hot and inefficient as the way an electric resistance dryer does. The rest of the world does not use electric resistance dryers. Most of the rest of the world uses condensing dryers. So on the right-hand side, this is a condensing washer and dryer. That's the common technology everywhere. China, Japan, Europe, all of it. What it does is it saves room because you only have one box doing two jobs. And the one box, the condensing washer and dryer, it doesn't exhaust air. Instead, the wet air is chilled inside the machine to get the water to condense out. So yes, there's an electric resistance element in there heating it up, but it's not a lot of power. It's about 1,400 watts, not 7,200 watts. So much, much less power, but it does have a lot of efficiency designed into the machine. So the upshot of it is that it takes 2.5 to 3 hours to dry laundry, as opposed to an hour and 15 minutes in an electric resistance dryer. At least that's my experience. I have both. I have a condensing washer dryer and an electric resistance dryer next to it, because I have 3 children and a farm and a mom that lives here. And it's like, sort of like, okay, the way this will work ideally is that we can dry 2 things at once. Now in the middle, this is a standard electric resistance dryer, but it's 120 volts, so you can plug it in anywhere, but it's not efficient. So it blows the hot air out, doesn't like recycle it and pull the water out and just keep the heat in there. And it's going to be the slowest of the ones you see here. On the left-hand side, this is a heat pump. The heat pump, what does that mean exactly? Because it's just a funny sounding word, right? What it means is that inside of it, there's a liquid that boils at a very, very low temperature. Like it can boil at -30 Fahrenheit. It'll boil, go from liquid to gas, incredibly cold temperatures. And they use that ability for this liquid to boil inside to pull heat out. Because essentially, like, let's say that you were to like lick your hand and then blow on it and you feel that's cold. That evaporation is sucking heat out of your body. That process of pulling heat out and putting heat in is a heat pump. I think I need some illustrations to make it prettier, but basically they have a little tiny heat pump inside. These are these 3 options, all of which are 120 volts, plug it in anywhere. So the washing machine that's there right now, there's to go back, you saw that the washing machine, there's 2 plugs here. And then there's also this 240 volt one. And I'm suggesting that you get a machine that plugs into one of these 2 outlets so that this amount of electricity can be used, for instance, for your stove. Now, going back to this here, there's your dryer options. There's more, but these are like the 3 basic options. And next, for water heaters. These are all 120-volt water heaters. Plug it in anywhere at water heaters. Since about 2015, I've been harassing Rheem and A.O. Smith, the 2 main manufacturers in the United States, to make a heat pump, that water heater that was 120 volt, because I was running out of power. I was trying to do electrification retrofits of apartments, which don't get even 100 amps. The code doesn't require it for them. So I kept on running into problems where I couldn't get rid of something gas would have to stay. And the cause of it was that I ran out of my power budget with the water heaters. So I said, please. And then a whole bunch of people got on board. We did a ton of research and just on and on and on. Now it's 2023 and Rheem offers a heat pump water heater. Plug it in anywhere, put it into the garage. So does LG. This is the quietest. This is on the left, Rheem's, those are 55 decibels. That's legit kind of loud when you're standing next to it. It's a home, you know, it's on, so you put it into an acoustically isolated closet or put it into the garage. No one really notice or care. In the middle, LG makes one with a computer inside called an inverter. And this computer operates it at a quieter noise. So it's about 1/4 as loud. It's about 45 decibels or so. And then A.O. Smith has done a similar, not the same job. They don't have an inverter in it, but they also have about 45 decibel noise through a variety of strategies that they put into it. It ends up not being quite as efficient as having a computer, but it's quiet. So all 3 of these heat pump water heaters, you could plug it in any old spot in your house, but I would recommend the 2 on the right if you were going to be bothered by noise. How noisy? You know, it's like, would you put a laundry dryer, when you have a laundry dryer in your house, most people put laundry dryers inside of a closet with some louvered doors. That's what you'd want for the Rheem on the left-hand side. It's about that loud, like, as you know, sadly. But then the LG and the A.O. Smith models, nah, it's like a quiet refrigerator, you know, like a dishwasher running or something. Just a real low noise, not much. So, and Don, I wanted to ask, where that water heater is in your garage, is your bedroom or anyone's bedroom next to where it sits? Because that would maybe make it not good for the Rheem.
No, there's no bedroom there. It's a den on the other side, so it would be fine.
Perfect. Yeah, the Rheem one is going to be your least expensive option at about $2,000 to purchase before incentives and rebates and things like that. So you can lower the price and just deal with, well, you're not going to have to deal with the noise. It's in a garage. No big deal.
Hey, Sean, if I can jump in here.
Please.
Those water heaters are also programmable as far as time goes. So you can block your water heater from coming on during your hours of sleep. So that's one way of getting around the noise issue if it's near a bedroom.
It's a really good point, Wayne. I appreciate you bringing that up. A lot of people don't realize that water heaters can be turned off for days without losing their heat inside. I personally have a 7-gallon tank for my water heating for my shower, and I'll turn it off so I can plug in my car. I have a very tight, constrained power budget. And what I find is that if I turn it off at night, in the morning, I'll get up and I can take my wicked hot shower after a whole night of it not being on. And that's with 7 gallons. These tanks are 40 to 80 gallons. So many days before you'd run out of water. So yes, Wayne, you could definitely time it so that it was not an issue. Oh yeah, and thank you, Tom, for bringing that up. Tom is pointing out that the A.O. Smith on the right-hand side, a unique feature of it is that it has top attachments. See how there's this little tube up here and this tube right here? Those are the cold and the hot. Because they're on the top, you can put this heat pump water heater into a closet that's no wider than the tank, which is 26 inches wide. So if you had a tight squeeze, that's the one. The A.O. Smith is the one for the tight closets. Whereas you can see the LG appears to have side connections. And the ream definitely has side connections. Those side connections mean that a plumber has to get their hands in there and do work on the sides, which really means that even though the ream is 21 inches wide, it needs to be in a 30-inch closet so that there's room. Whereas the A.O. Smith, it's 26 inches wide and can go into a 26-inch wide closet because all the stuff is done on top. So these are subtleties, but when you're retrofitting your home, sometimes every house is so weird. Everyone's installations are like, so it's just good to have tools, multiple different ways you can approach something. So when Tom Cabot here was doing the analysis of the gas loads that showed up in the wintertime, I'm gonna just take it back real quick. It's kind of fun to see. Here's the therms, and you can see in the wintertime how Dawn's consumption goes from say 0.13 therms a day, and as well, this is sort of going backwards. So if this is the peak of summer, August, and going backwards, here's May, here's April and March, February, right, and January. And these are all sort of winter-related space heating loads. So Tom had done the analysis of how much gas that was and said, no, that means that this house needs about a 1.5 ton heat pump, which is about as small as a ducted heat pump goes. You can get 1.5s. A 2 ton is common. And lots of people would, like if an HVAC installer came to Don and didn't look at his gas bills, Don would be getting a 3 ton heat pump for sure. They might even try to convince him to do 4 tons. Totally unnecessary. It's just how HVAC contractors think. Now, on the left-hand side, this is what it looks like to have an air conditioner on the right-hand side. Oh, sorry, this is a furnace and air conditioner. That gray box, that is a furnace and air conditioner box. And over here, this is a different product that looks exactly the same. The air handler for a heat pump is designed on purpose to fit in the same gray metal box as a furnace and air conditioner. So it's easy to take one box out and swap in a different box up in the attic. You know, the ductwork is attached to this device here, and you can just take out the gas furnace one and put in perhaps from the same manufacturer, the same size box, and it'll do that work. It's pretty easy, is my point. It's like a simple, easy change. There's a bunch of manufacturers that make them. And this here, York, Goodman, Daikin, Carrier. Carrier is the best brand in the United States for heat pumps, in my opinion. No one pays me to have opinions, by the way. I get no kickbacks. This is just me being friendly, telling you what my opinion is. So Carrier is my general recommendation. Daikin is the world's largest manufacturer. Daikin owns Goodman. So Goodman is Daikin, and Goodman is like their cheap brand. Fine. And York is another, and I can go down a list. There's a bunch. But if anyone's curious, I think that Carriers, they do have some of the most efficient heat pumps. Well, they have the most efficient heat pumps, I'll say. Then this. So Tristan, you were asking me, like, do I have any sort of new things I'm going to share? And this is one of them. This just came out. So Don, this is a super efficient space heating system that fits into sash windows. Sash being the kind that go up and down as opposed to sliders. So this is only a solution for a sash style window, but Midea, which is China's one of China's largest manufacturers, but essentially it's sort of the premium brand in China of domestically manufactured stuff. So if you're in China, you're like, yay, Midea. If you're in Japan, it's yay, Panasonic as like the #1 brand. So Midea, super high quality. Love their stuff personally. I've bought a bunch of different Midea heat pumps over the years. And this is what's called a saddle bag. So you fit it over, you open up your sash window and you fit it over the windowsill. And it is, noting here, designed for do-it-yourself installation and self-performing and high-performing energy-efficient heating and cooling. It offers 9,000 BTUs, and 9,000 is 3/4 of a ton, and I said you need 1.5 tons. So 2 of these, if they're running in the wintertime, would be enough to heat your entire house. 2 windows worth. And this would be the easiest thing that you could do. It's a 120 volt, so you just plug it into the outlet next to the window where you had it in, and you'd be done. And it's actually a very high efficiency heat pump. The SEER of 16.0 or SEER2 of 21.8. These are different metrics that are all more or less trying to measure the same thing of summertime air conditioning. CEER is something that's done in other states than California. California uses the SEER metric. Whatever. But 21.8 SEER2. That means this is an air conditioner that is among the most efficient air conditioners you can buy. I guess this goes into a window, but I'll say it again. Like most SEER2s are in the range of 12, 13, 14. At 21.8, this is as good as any of the best systems you can get of any type. This is a really premium high efficiency heat pump, even though you might think that it's just like, well, I can get it at Home Depot, so it's kind of junky, right? No, no, this is an awesome heat pump. It was designed to meet in 2017, I've been going around to conferences for many years and meeting with manufacturers and cities to try to progress electrification products. So I wrote the specification for this that was then parlayed into NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Agency. NYSERDA then put out a competition based upon the spec, and this is one of the winners. So I'm very pleased after all these years, like, yay, my idea came through. So you could do this, Don. 2 of these things, you'd be done. And so true for anyone else. So then your stove. Most people, and it would be normal for you to take out this gas stove and run a 50 amp, 240 volt circuit to that spot. It would be the biggest amperage draw of anything that you have in your house, potentially. Now, the replacement that I'd recommend would be from Samsung. That's the cheapest one, $900 now on sale today, I found. And it's it's 4 burners on top. And the reason I like this one particularly is because it has a very big burner. It has an 11-inch induction spot on the top right-hand side you can see. And Frigidaire, which also makes an inexpensive induction model, they have an 8-inch, not 11 inches, 8-inch is their largest, which is just not that big, actually. So I'm a big fan of the Samsung. They were early entrants into the induction market. But let's say, Don, you wanted to have something a little fancier. You can spend thousands of dollars on induction ranges. Up to $22,000 is the most expensive induction range I've found. It's one of those ones with 4 ovens and 6 burners on top, that kind of nonsense. But even this one on the right-hand side, the Big Chill, this is a retro-looking induction range for $6,000. So I don't know where your budget is, but I've tried to give you, the brackets. $900, get a Samsung. It's a really good product. I just got one from my grandma's house about a mile away. Side story. A reason why you might want induction, particularly as you age in place, is because all of us get a little bit more forgetful as we age. The consequence of being forgetful when you have a gas stove or an electric resistant stove is if you leave it on, you can light your pan on fire. When you have an induction range, it doesn't get that hot. I mean, it gets wicked hot enough to fry food, but frying food happens at about 350 degrees on the pan, and a gas stove is burning at, say, 1400 degrees. And you're trying to keep the flame from melting the pan. But if you walk away, a gas stove will melt a pan, as will an electric resistant stove. They can melt aluminum pans and light your house on fire. So when my grandma nearly lit the house on fire a few weeks ago, she's 102, right? She walked away. So my mom and I immediately went out and got an induction range to replace the electric resistance one that was there. That was dangerous. It could get too hot and it made the house all smoky, and that's terrible for people's health. If you have like a Teflon lined pan, Teflon is hard plastic. If you burn plastic, you never burn plastic and breathe plastic, right? Everyone knows that. Well, if you burn your pan with plastic on it and you run over to the stove to try to get the pan off, you're inhaling plastic, and it's terrible for your body. It poisons you with dioxin. So as a safety measure, you could get an induction range. And Tristan, at the early beginning, she was mentioning how they are like gas stoves produce the same amount of air pollution as about 2 packs of cigarettes a day. People think that, oh, is that true? And then, yeah, there's studies since 1995 continuously showing that it's about 2 packs a day of cigarette smoking. If you look at the flames, you realize like, that's a lot of fuel I'm burning. If you think to yourself, well, there's no visible smoke, so therefore there is no smoke. You're forgetting that invisible things are only invisible to our human eyes. When I turn an infrared camera on it, when I have chemical sensors on the wall, it's just like the amount of burning that happens with an idling car. It's about the same amount of gas. And you would never, right, put the exhaust of a car in, like hose it into your kitchen, just thinking like, sure, I live life that way. I just burn cars in my kitchen. So this is, just keep that in mind. There's nothing dirtier in your life. That is the #1 source of formaldehyde in your life is your gas stove. It's the #1 source of benzene, 2 intensely cancer-causing agents. And it's also the #1 source of nitrous oxides. Even if you live in Ventura and you have filthy outside air quality during smoggy days, that filthiness is in the range of like 60 to 80 parts per billion of nitrous oxides. One dish on a gas stove, I just said 60 to 80, right? One dish on a gas stove gets you to 120 parts per billion. And if you cook a full meal, you're at 400 parts per billion. And outside on a terrible smoggy day is 60 to 80 parts per billion. Your gas stove is the source of the most pollution that you have in your life, unless you work at an industrial site or something really crazy. Gas stoves are very bad for your health, very bad for your children's health, bad for your pet's health. Anything, a lot of the chemicals, they're heavier than air, so they sink down around your feet, and so dogs, cats, babies, all of them get hit even harder than you do. Now, I mentioned before how you're gonna have to rewire to put in one of these stoves, a 240-volt, 50-amp circuit. To do that takes some money, some time. It's not terrible, but these are some other options. This is what I do. I have a 2-burner induction range and a third one, and I plug them into 2 different parts of the kitchen, and so I can cook it all at the same time. It's 2 different circuits that I'm using, so they're not combined on one circuit. And then I have this oven here, the Oster extra large French door. So $150 for my 2-burner. I actually spent more, about $200 on the single burner because it's fancier. And then another $150 for my oven. And for less than $500, I had a complete kitchen. And I did that in 2017, shortly after my mother-in-law died in the Tubbs fire. She died in that climate change-induced fire, and I kind of flipped out and said, the only thing we had left was this antique gas stove that I thought was so pretty, and we got rid of it. And so this is the cheap and easy way, was just get a couple 120-volt of equivalent appliances. Not for everybody, but if you're concerned about the cigarette smoke-like nature of stoves, you can solve that right now. Like get on Amazon and get an induction 2-burner range, and then take your time doing the rest of the work. Now, the options that you have here, these are plug strips for 240-volt outlets. So let's say, I'm going to go back to your dryer picture. Don, you have a dryer that has that 240 there. Oops. This 240-volt, 30-amp outlet, if we were to plug one of those boxes into it that I just showed you, that plug strip-like box, you could plug your electric resistance dryer into it if you want that. That's cool. And you could plug in a heat pump water heater, a super fast EV charger, a variety of things that could use that plug at the same time as your electric resistance dryer. Meaning it's a strategy to avoid rewiring. It's a strategy just the way that people get 120-volt plug strips. They don't drill a new outlet into their wall. No, they go get a plug strip for 120-volt devices. And these are plug strips for 240 volts. I like NeoCharge the most. It's made in California, about $500. They've been around for a while. And so you can see here, this is a dryer that this is sitting on, this cord. This is a dryer. And they've got their electric resistance dryer plugged into it. And then this is an EV charger with a little hose that's coiled up on top of the dryer. And that's an example of how you could use your dryer plug to fuel your EV charger. You might have to drill a hole through your wall or in some way like get that cord out. Every house is different. So this isn't a cure-all. It's just one of the options I'm trying to present to you, that you could use that 30 amp 240 volt plug and you could have multiple devices plugged into it. Now, you're right at the threshold of the amount of solar on your roof that a 100 amp service can fit at the panel. But there's two different places to connect solar. One is at the circuit breaker panel, and on the circuit breaker panel, you can use up to 16 amps of the 100, or 16%. So it's like if it was a 200 amp panel, it would be 32 amps. If it's a 100 amp panel, it's 16 amps. That's the amount of power on the roof that you can push into the circuit breaker panel, which is equivalent to about a 4 kilowatt array, which is what you need. But you might need like 4.5 to 5. So you're right at that edge. And the simplest, easiest thing you could do would be to get a connector. So this is also called a meter collar. This is the meter, this device here. I'm going to throw you back to the first image to remind you that you own, where is that thing? There. You own everything that's red. They own the meter itself, that little round thing, and they own the wires, but you can put something behind that blue circle, the meter collar. Going back to it here, there. This meter collar, you can plug not a 4 kilowatt array, but a 15 kilowatt array in. If you plug it in at the meter, or differently put, about 63%, as opposed to 16%. 16% of the circuit breaker panel, 63% of the power at the meter. So putting a meter collar in allows you to put in a 15 kW PV array, or, not and, but or a really fast DC supercharger. This is a place you can plug in something way faster than you could plug into your 100 amp circuit breaker panel without running out of space. So the connector, full device, like I said, it's designed for both EVs or for large solar arrays. Different strategy. This is, you'd replace your circuit breaker panel, the 100 amp circuit breaker panel that you have, and you put these 100 amp circuit breaker panels in. But these are special because they're smart, quote unquote. So what they can do is they can take not 100 amps, but 400 amps of stuff can get plugged into your 100 amp service there. And you can just luxuriate in the sheer amounts of things you can plug in without having to worry about a service upgrade. These are made in San Diego, the span. Genius is made up in Canada, not exactly sure where, but they're two competing good equivalent products. Don, do you have a question on that?
No, not at the moment. Thanks.
So almost at the end of the ideas that I had for you here. Now, one of the questions you had is how to deal with the battery. And we talked about how you already have a Hyundai Ioniq, and that Ioniq is designed, like in other countries, people are using the Ioniq now as their home battery. And you had like you could use it for a home battery for just like 120 volt, with just a little few things to plug in. But these chargers up here, Enphase, Wallbox, Asiaco, Nuvve, these are all examples of bidirectional EV chargers where your car battery is your house battery. And the car battery can also become a grid resource. You think of how your solar array dumps electricity into the grid. Well, car batteries can provide that kind of electricity into the grid, even more, in fact. The sheer amount of battery that's there is much more power than even a very large solar array. Like a 15 kW solar array, that's huge. Most people only have 4 or 5. Well, these can charge into the grid 10 to 20 kW. So it's equivalent to a really big solar array's worth of power in the moment, as well as the fact that they store so much energy. So the F-150 Lightning here, you got a used one for $57,000. And then you put $10,000 worth of fancy chargers, because this here, this is only one part of it. In fact, if you were going to afford to be able to power your house, there'd be a few more devices on the wall. So that's why I say 10 grand. But look up here. The same amount of electricity stored in an F-150 Lightning, which is 100 kilowatt hours for the base model, 100 kilowatt hours. A Tesla Powerwall is 13 kilowatt hours in it, so therefore you need about 7.5 of them to equal an F-150. The price of this, $130,000 installed right now. It's average in California is $1,300 a kilowatt hour installed. So 100 kilowatt hours gets you $130,000 versus $67,000 for the same amount of electricity stored, same amount of power in the moment. So this is the future. Tesla is the only company who's refusing to make their cars bi-directional because they sell stationary batteries that fit on walls. All the other EV manufacturers are running for it. They think we're selling huge batteries and we just need to be able to let them get energy into the grid. So Asiaco is for sale. There's one that's installed in Oakland on a project. Wallbox, Nuvve, Enphase, they're not actually for sale. They keep on saying it'll be this year, 2024, but I haven't seen it yet. But the year's not over. But this is kind of a almost here kind of thing, like next year, towards the end of this year, or go get an Asiaco right now. Just starting this huge movement to stop using dinky, expensive, space-consuming batteries and instead roll up with a huge battery. And this is another part of the vision of the future / a picture of the present. So in Utrecht, the Netherlands, the city, they're targeting 100% vehicle-to-grid sustainability by 2030. So what that means to them is that if they get 14,000 chargers installed, and they have 1,000 bidirectional chargers so far, when they get to 14,000 for this city of about 170,000 people, you see in the upper left-hand corner of the city, then they're going to be able to absorb all the excess solar in the day and all the excess wind that may be in the grid that day and be able to use just the car batteries to be able to power the whole city at night. I mean, this is only 14,000 EV chargers they need, and there are probably going to be 100 to 200,000 EVs in the city at 2030. So they only need even a small percentage of those cars to be plugged in to do this amazing work. And the work is all because there's just massive batteries in there. So that's happening now. You can like watch little documentaries on it and such, and it's very exciting. I've met with PG&E twice in the last 2 weeks to talk about their efforts for this, and PG&E is also really pumped on this. They're working directly with Ford to try to make the F-150 Lightning here be the first bidirectional power plant. The way like Tesla Powerwalls are being used as virtual power plants in Texas and in California for the last couple of years, where there's been a signal that goes out from grid operators and the batteries on people's walls discharge electricity into the grid, and it's prevented power outages in California, like brownouts, both the last 2 summers during heat waves. People have been using this disaggregated batteries over everyone's house, virtual power plants. And PG&E wants to use these much larger batteries, as Utrecht is doing, to make it work for the whole city. So that's what PG&E wants. Utilities who are savvy are looking at these car batteries as the best batteries they could get. Think about this for a moment. There are 80 times as much car battery driving on the roads in California, 80 times as there is wall batteries like the Tesla Powerwalls in terms of capacity. There's 3 times as much car batteries driving around as there is utility installed batteries, the really big container type batteries. So no matter how you cut it, the vehicle option is really where we're going. Now, there were a couple questions about how to Inflation Reduction Act. So I wanted to clarify that there's 2 options that are for home electrification in the Inflation Reduction Act, and one of them is easier and more applicable than the other. This is the easy one. It's the 30% tax credit for residential efficiency and electrification up to $3,200 a year. So you're not going to hopefully spend more than 20 grand electrifying everything in your house. So maybe you can get up to about $6,000 over the course of a few years of tax credit incentives out of, say, of a $20,000 expense. The 30% tax credit is also that's the same 30% you can get off of your solar array. It's a different tax credit. I'm just saying it's the same number. Just have to think 30%. I can get 30% off a solar array. I can get 30% off a battery. I can get 30% off of home electrification. That includes heat pumps for water heating and space heating, and for a new electrical panel, you can get up to $1,200 for weatherizing. It's not even electrification per se, but just making your house more energy efficient. $600 for other energy properties. And I believe this would refer to, say, like, maybe that's an EV charger, but it's definitely like a swimming pool or a hot tub heat pump that are a little less common, but they're there. This one is not very available to you because it is restricted to households that make less than 80% of area median income. And the Department of Energy, as they're putting out, these are big numbers, but they're making the money available to direct install low-income weatherization programs. So you're a nonprofit and you're going to get this money and you're going to go weatherize and electrify existing low-income housing. Not really the situation for this crowd here. I don't think any of you live in low-income housing, so you're not going to get the benefit of a direct install program. So I just refocus your attention on this 30% tax credit. And that's what I wanted to show you, like how you might think about electrifying your house, and for some other people too. And Don, do you have any questions, or you want to jump into questions from the audience?
I just had a couple points. I wanted to ask on the electric stove, the oven part is resistance heat. Is that not true? Electric resistance?
It depends upon the oven. So some ovens are gas and some are electric with a gas stove, but mostly you have a gas oven with a gas stove. But this is
So,
kind of,
yeah, I mean, but for the Samsung, for instance, is that electric resistance oven then?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes, it is.
Okay.
And the resistance, a higher grade of it is it has a fan in it, which is called a convection oven.
Right.
But most people, I mean, a stove is roughly 6% of the energy use of a house, a small amount. And the oven, we studied oven use. The oven in turn is less than 1% of that. Like, it's not even, if there's 6%, 1%, like 1% equals 6%, I'm trying to say. So it's a very small minority of your stove use is your oven use. It's
yes,
not,
that's certainly for me. I don't use an oven that much,
yeah.
but I do have a single panel induction cooktop there on the right on my photo.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah.
You're right. Good on you.
And there are those pans and are all induction ready. So
Right.
Nicely done.
yeah.
Well, I want to make sure, since we're at time, that we answer anybody else's questions. I know a lot of them will be, answered in the chat, but if you want to unmute and ask a question or raise your hand, I don't know if Leanne and Kate and everybody else, if we got to all of your questions fully. I saw a lot of back and forth. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I actually have two questions about induction stoves, and one is, what is the model of that Samsung? And then the other is about the costs involved in wiring, because you're saying $500, and I got a quote for almost $2,000, which was not only for the 240-volt outlet, but also for running wiring dedicated to the panel. And they said, no, you definitely need that. And of course, some of the cost is also the permit. So it's maybe about $1,500 for the wiring.
Yeah, that's an absurdly high price. The wiring is going to be a few hours of their time, and so you have to figure out, like, what are they charging for? But that's why I would encourage you to get multiple bids for any piece of work that's significant like this, because 3 bids is the rule. I used to run bids for a big construction company, and you could see widely varying amounts, like hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference between different contractors for bigger projects. But it's always like, wow, how do these guys come to such different numbers?
Is it true that the wiring should run from the stove to the panel? It should be a dedicated line. It just shouldn't cost that much to do it?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it does need to be a dedicated 240 volt, 50 amp circuit. And that is just basically a thick piece of copper wire. And, you know, if I'm trying to think, like, how could they do that much work? But do you have a crawl space underneath the house? Like, have you figured out how they're going to physically get that wire from where it is to the panel?
There's a crawl space, and they said it's partly based on the length and the cost of the copper wire. So it's like, 20 feet plus running up from the crawl space to the two spots, and then capping off the old gas.
Right. Well, capping off the old gas is a different part of the cost. So I'm hoping they're breaking it out. But the wire, on average, is about $500. And so you can, if you look at just that amount of it, because it's no big deal. The wire is very cheap compared to their labor. The labor is really the cost that they're charging you. And it shouldn't be that hard to drill a hole, fall underneath, pop another hole up. It's a few hours. And so their labor should be like $150 an hour, something like that for an electrician. So under $500 for 3 hours of work.
Okay. Thanks.
Although it's not like that, Sean, here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I mean, we're not finding it here in Orange County. Like when I was doing my oven too, Kate, I mean, they wanted 1,500, but we kept getting them down because we're like, what are you really doing? How, So I think it is a challenge where you have to kind of go back and forth. But Wendy has a good comment where she paid $1,200 to run that dedicated line.
In the San Mateo study, we were finding 1,500 was pretty common for running that cooktop circuit. So they're definitely making a lot of money at it, and
cost of living.
Well, and the thing is that
yes,
in the United States, the Bay Area is the most expensive place to build. Period. There's no place more expensive. So getting numbers from the Bay Area, like San Mateo County, that's Silicon Valley. There's no place more expensive to do anything. And so Tom's numbers make total sense there, but not really for any other part of the country.
I call it revenge of the blue collar.
Yeah.
They deserve some money too. So I hopefully you can get some better pricing, Kate, for a second or third bid and see if you can find the right.
Or keep talking to going back to them. But I know it's not easy. I'm lucky that I'm married to an electrical engineer and he was able to go, well, explain that to me. Why do we, what are you really doing? And then
That's
they were
part
like,
of it.
Go ahead.
What was the model of this Samsung?
Let me, in a second here, let me take it out, and I have to go onto the internet here for just a second because I had the model
That's
up.
fine. And if somebody else wants to raise their hand for the next question, can definitely do that. And we'd really love, and we'll do Nancy Kelly next. And we'd really love any of you who have electrified your home. I'm going to put my email in the chat if you can reach out to me again.
You have it.
And we'd love to share your case study on the next show.
This is $900, 6.3 cubic foot oven, rapid smart. I mean, this is a big, nice induction range. And a few years ago, they were almost twice that expensive. But there's no physical reason why they should be more expensive than an electric resistance stove. And the prices are finally starting to drop down to reflect that. So there in the chat, Kate, you can find that link, which has the product.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I was looking at Consumer Reports recommendations, and most of those are more in like the $2,000 to $3,000 range. So this is worth looking at.
Yeah, and like I said, I have it. I went out and Samsung was early, and so in 2015 is the first time I got to hang out with a Samsung induction range, but it was more like $3,000, and it had fake little blue flames. So when you turned up the heat on induction, the lights would shine, look like a little blue flame going around it. But this is not quite that drama. This is a $900 good product. I see Virginia Bernal. do you want to ask
I'm
your question?
I thought I was next. I'm sorry to
Oh.
interject. Nancy Kelly.
Yes,
Hi,
I
Nancy.
had asked Nancy to
Oh,
go
sorry,
next,
my
and then
bad.
we'll do Virginia.
No,
Oh.
I'm very sorry. I'm in my car. That's why I didn't put my video on. I'm in the dark. I just got out of a meeting, so I came in late, so I know nothing. I will say, I have an induction range. We had to get, we got is it Pactel and Taylor and Pactel or something? Because we had to get, I have this very small kitchen and we had to get one that with it where the depth was an unusually less deep stove. So that's the one we got. I'm just reporting. And it was more expensive, but it's been great. We've had it for a couple of years. So I just came in, as I said, so I don't know if this is just about stovetops. I've had this ongoing question as a condo owner, and I don't know if I can ask it tonight.
Please do. What is your question?
Well, it's just mainly I'm on the board and I just got on the board recently, and a group of us are trying to find out what the resource. Now I'm down in San Diego, so might be a whole different situation, different resource.
What's the question though?
But the question is, how do condo owners, what are the resources? Where do we go to find out about, to present to our board about installing solar panels for our units?
Okay. So a solar contractor, someone who installs solar, and you always get more than one bid, as I mentioned, but the solar contractor should be able to put together a proposal. You're going to have the challenge of shared roofs, like a homeowners association kind of hassle. But basically, you put a solar array up on the roof, and then do a virtual net energy metering, VNEM it's called, so that this one big array can be divided up at the billing department of the utility and then credited to each person's apartment or condo, pardon me, as opposed to, this is assuming on a shared building with condos.
Right. Yes, it is.
Yeah. And so
a
VNEM, virtual net energy metering, is what you do, make it easy and cheap. And I think a solar contractor should be able to put together a proposal for that and always get more than one.
Okay, great.
Now, and to your point, I don't know if you can see this, but I brought up here a 24-inch induction range for anyone who has a narrow situation. This is the thinnest induction range, and you can see it has only 3 burners on the top, not 4. But it's this is made by Blomberg, very fancy. So these are being made for Europe primarily, and they're just coming to the United States because Europe has lots of skinny little ranges and 24 inches.
Can you fit a turkey in there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've studied this. I'm a turkey farmer. And so having studied this for years, how big, you need in the range of 17 to 18 inches of width, which is not much, for a 30-pound turkey. So an old Wedgwood, an old, one of those things, they have in the range of 17 to 20-inch wide, really tiny little ovens. And you can stick a 30-pound turkey in there and get a gorgeous turkey at the end. This, I believe, is in dimensions quite a bit larger than 17 inches. Specifications, let's see here.
Before I got my
24 inches wide. So this is probably closer to 20 inches on the inside. Plenty enough for a huge turkey.
Before I got my induction, as I said, my kitchen is unusual. I always had what's called an apartment size oven, which are very narrow. It's probably might be like that one. And we always got our turkey. And now you can't get a whole lot of other stuff in.
True.
You have to stagger your cooking and then reheating things. So, but it does work. This time we were able to fit in the width is we got a width that's normal, but it had to be less steep. So that's why we had to go with that Taylor and Pactel, or I can't even recall the name, but it's something like that.
Yeah, Phillips and anyway. Hey,
yeah.
Cal.
Thank you. Thank you for that input. That's perfect. I thought we'd have to go through some other rigmarole before we went right to the contractors, and I just wanted to
So
check first. Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate
you're
it.
welcome, Nancy. Virginia, I think you were next.
Okay, hi. I put in a note in the a question in the chat. Last year, I got very fond of the idea of getting a water heat pump, heat pump water heater that uses carbon dioxide as refrigerant.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with the idea because I feel if we could use carbon dioxide as refrigerant, it's the least damaging of the refrigerants that we use. I worry about all these heat pumps that have these higher level refrigerants and what they might do to the environment as people get careless with them. But
Well, yeah,
have you
you're right.
heard
There's
about it?
that
Do you know
product.
anything about it?
I do. So I put a bunch of these into apartment complexes, the Sanko too. What they are is they're designed for the Japanese bathing habit of showering and then getting into a 150-gallon bathtub. So these are very high capacity hot water output heat pumps. They produce 4 times as much hot water as the tanks I've been showing you. And you can see this is a big box here. This is the heat pump with a big fan in it. So this is the 4 times as much capacity, of heating in the moment. Now, on the topic of refrigerants, this is going to be also 4 times as expensive. So you're not going to buy it for $2,000. You're going to buy it for like $6,000 and then install it.
Yes.
And it's going to be not cheap.
Yeah.
But it is for homes that have gigantic bathtubs, like those eggshell bathtubs that people have, or big Japanese sitting tubs. Now, you're saying like, well, maybe you want to get it because of its refrigerant.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the amount of refrigerant that is in a heat pump water heater, the tank types that I showed you, the amount that's in there is about 1/4 of a pound. So in that range of like 4 to 5 weight of ounces, like in your hand, 4 ounces or so of weight. That is so little that if it were to leak all at once, like you just damaged it and you let all of that leak out, that amount of catastrophic loss would not even equal the amount of methane that is being leaked from your methane water heater, your natural gas water heater.
But even though it's like 600 times the or 300 times the,
Yeah.
greenhouse.
This is the thing we're running into, is that we're discovering that methane is a far more powerful climate change agent than we realized. And it is responsible for about 40% of climate change in the world is leaked methane, not burnt. So, or differently put, how about this? The amount of climate change that's caused by a gas water heater is roughly 100 times worse every year than the amount of refrigerant that's in a heat pump water heater. About 100 times worse. So while it's important, like refrigerants out there are nasty stuff, they are 1% of the problem of burning. So it's like you wouldn't not electrify because you have refrigerants in your heat pump water heaters that, should a disaster happen, would cause some damage in the world. Because it's really unlikely that they're going to leak. They're a closed system, factory sealed, everything's kind of nice about them. And as long as they don't leak, then there's like you're 100% better as opposed to 99% better.
Okay, so this one then you don't recommend because you think it's just more powerful than I would probably need. I know they have a 40-gallon tank.
Yeah, here's that 40-gallon tank.
Yeah.
And it is more powerful than you probably need.
Okay.
And if you have money, have fun, But I use these for like one of these water heaters I will pair with 7 tiny houses for homeless veterans, and they never run out of hot water. Just with that one thing. So it's like 7 households worth, and I've done as much as one of these water heaters to 12 apartments.
But maybe Virginia wants to be the neighborhood water heater. And you
need everybody's water.
So I have one more question. You mentioned that the water heaters can be fit into little closets, but don't they need a lot of space to draw the temperature? How does that work in a closet? So because I thought you had to have a big room for that to have a water heater. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So you don't. You need to have a vented door. you need to have a louvered door. And I've studied this a whole bunch. I'm trying to think, I think I could even show this to you quickly. G.E. Offrey, Wicks. Okay, so Jeff Wicks is the head of the Northeast Alliance of something or other. And I say, hey, Jeff, what's the efficiency of heat pump water is running in well-ventilated closets? And he says, hey, here you go. So you see what I'm seeing? These are all different efficiencies. So the very best efficiency you could hope for is a 3.3, which means 1 unit of electricity gets you 2.3 extra units of heat out of the environment. So that's the most efficient. But if you put it into a vented closet, so a fully louvered door, it says door louvers, full. So the whole closet door is a bunch of louvers. You have lost about 10% of the efficiency, but it's still pretty darn good.
Yes.
And this 3.3, this is ducted with a large makeup. So you have to put a bunch of money into big duct work to do that right, or ducted with small makeup. But the problem is I've found is that, yes, if the duct work is installed correctly, but if it's in any way kinked, then all of a sudden the kind of weak fan that's in there, now your efficiency is dropped down to not a 3, but to a 2, all because the duct work wasn't done quite right. So I've found that it's safer, guaranteed to work right if I put a louvered door on it and not bother with a bunch of duct that could go well or not go well.
Okay.
So fully louvered doors are a very efficient strategy.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question related to efficiency and water heaters. We live in a home that is shared with my parents. So we have 2 of everything right now as far as heat pump, furnace. Well, no, sorry, not heat pump, but 2 furnaces and 2 water heaters. And we're thinking of going to 1 water heater in the garage and then piping over the roof to our more centrally located second water heater position and getting rid of that second water heater. But I'm worried about the the heat loss and how that efficiency. And do you have any suggestions about that? It's probably about a 40-foot distance.
Yeah. So you will not have as much of an issue with heat loss as you will with there being a large volume of cold water that you have to get rid of before your hot water arrives. If you were, and that's just, you can be at peace with that. But there's a couple strategies that you could use. One is you could install a skinnier pipe. So you could have, say, a 1/2 inch as opposed to a 3/4. And that skinnier, each time you go from a 3/4 inch pipe to a 1/2 inch, that is cutting half of the water out that's in there, that's in the way. And if you go from a 1/2 inch to hypothetically a 3/8 inch, which you wouldn't do, but that's another half. So if you were to focus on doing a 1/2 inch connection, that 40 feet, that's one good strategy. The second one would be to put in a recirculator pump, but it has to be a push button. If you do an occupancy sensor, what we've found, like we've deployed them in 60 apartments and more than 40 of the apartments, the occupancy sensors were just going on all the time. A bird flies by, someone walks by the bathroom, there's a reflection off a mirror. You're just like, oh my God, this thing is on nonstop and it's wasting so much energy and it's making the heat pump itself less efficient because heat pumps don't like seeing a whole bunch of water, warm water come in. They want cold water to work right. So an on-demand push-button recirculation pump would be the other strategy to just, so that when you go into the bathroom, you push the button and you're taking off your clothes and you get into the shower and the water's hot. You know, you push the button, you use the toilet, and then you get up and you wash your hands and the water's hot because it took a few seconds to recirculate it. But then that's an efficient strategy. And it doesn't waste water because, of course, when you're turning on the water to get rid of all the cold, there's a bunch of cold water you're running down the drain. So those 2, if you could go from a 3/4 inch to a 1/2 inch, if you could put in a push button recirc, you'd be golden. And maybe, you know, you have a couple choices. This would be one, like putting in a big heat pump water heater for your 2 households. One strategy. The other strategy would be putting in one of those products I showed you, but putting in an 80-gallon one. So you have a lot of stored volume. You don't have a lot of heat production capacity because the heat pump is 1/4 as much heating It's 4,000 BTUs, not 15,000. This is a 15,400 BTU heat pump, 4 times as much heating capacity. So this would be one if you had like kind of a small apartment complex you're running. And then the other one is how most families I work with heat pump water heaters. So we'll put in 80-gallon heat pump water heaters for households of 5 to 7 people, and it works just fine. So yeah, kind of any of these products here we produce 80-gallon models, and that'd be the other idea. That's just a lot cheaper.
Yeah, thank you so much. So instead of getting 2 separate units, this would be your recommendation for a more efficient RO. Okay.
Yeah, I'd
Great.
say, get an 80-gallon tank. And their prices went up during COVID and they've dropped recently, which is great. Things sort of returned to normal somewhat. And did you have any questions about your furnace? You're just basically thinking about that water heater.
Yeah, we're not to the furnace solution. We're not there yet. So we're in the water heater.
I showed you those inexpensive Medea window heat pumps. That's those are amazing. Just one of those per room or two would be enough to heat your house.
Yeah, my calculations are one of those little portable heat pumps can save about 100 therms per year if you were using it a bunch. So one way to transition is get one of those. It's only about $700 and try to save 100 therms this winter.
Oh God, and you think about when you put in HVAC systems, they usually cost $15,000 and up. And the idea that you could buy a few of those for under a couple grand and have the same amount of heating and cooling. Woo! That's because when you're electrifying your house, $15,000 for HVAC, $4,000 for the water heater, $1,000 for the stove, and $1,000 for the dryer. You can see that the water heater, the stove, and the dryer adding up to like $6,000 versus $15,000 for the HVAC. If you want to deal with cost compression, like getting rid of costs, focus on HVAC. Use some of these window heat pump systems that don't take so much labor to install, which costs so much money.
What if you don't have double hung windows?
You're out of luck. You need to put in a double.
That's what I thought you'd say.
Just put in one.
Or replace your window. I mean, totally serious here. Replacing your window, a window costs about $200, and the labor that's going to go into replacing the window might be up to $1,000. But if that then enables you to save $4,000, it's like if money is the issue, and I only focus on affordable housing. If money is the issue, then it'd be cheaper to replace your window and put in a high performance window heat pump than it would be for you to approach it from a central way.
Right, but Sean knows me, so
my landlord might notice.
Oh yeah, I would just get out my Sawzall and I would cut a cat door that I would put that thing through.
I go, what's that?
Ultra. So another option for your sliders, because sliders are very common in California. Sorry, where is this? Ultra quiet portable. I don't know if you've seen these types that they roll around, but here we go. So this is a portable heat pump. You're calling it an air conditioner, but there's a model that does the heating. So just look for the form factor for a moment. This box, it rolls around, and this is very renter friendly. I've been buying them for my staff for years now. And this hose that you see here, this is flexible. It comes out like a slinky, and you can put it into a slider. And so this is a way of getting you efficient, quiet heating and cooling. And I'm trying to find this is the one. High efficiency, ultra quiet with heat up. So it says with heat. I'm going to put this into the chat. And I have one of my staff lives in Los Angeles, and she nurses her baby next to this air conditioner in the summertime, and it's quiet enough that it doesn't wake the baby. It's the only one of these portable types, the Medea that I'm looking at here. It's the only one that's put in an inverter, the kind of computer in it that makes it operate quieter. So this is the one I'd recommend.
Yeah, because I had one of those air conditioning ones before, and it sounded like an airplane taking off, and my dog would not even go in the room.
They make them sucky. I mean, there's really bad ones out there. So I'm not recommending any other product, any other manufacturer. I mean, nothing else. If you're gonna do it, this is the only one
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
now, at least.
I mean, my other option that I've been thinking about is just getting a electric, heater, nothing that goes with the window, but just, I'm just gonna get electric heaters so I don't have to use my gas wall furnace this winter. So yeah.
Yeah, and I do too. My electric heater's right here, and they're $50. And so this being $600, $700, in the range.
Yeah, it's not really. Yeah, it's not really the price; it's the how it works and how it works with the dog. Let's just face it, the dog rules the house.
That's fine.
Well, they're family.
I know.
If it's not money, I mean, this provides air conditioning and heating, and it's reasonably quiet and it's efficient, but it is more expensive than getting just a heater. If that's all you need, then that's all you need.
Yeah. I've used those Vortex, I saw Voltex there, but Vortex before too. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's my goal this year. Don't turn on the wall heater.
Electric resistance is good. It's quiet and it gets the job done.
Yep.
Well, we're about at the conclusion. I can see Steve, you have your hand raised.
Steve, one more question from Steve.
Here. Steve, Whaley.
Oh yes, good evening. Thank you for taking my question, and I apologize. I had to step away if you already addressed this. I'm very interested in a heat pump type water heater, replacing my gas-fired water heater. I understand though that they can be noisy, and is there a particular brand that is quieter? And I don't want to go to the high end type. I'm thinking Ream or A.O. Smith. Is there?
Smith. Go get that. So the Ream tank, this tank here is literally 10 times as loud as the A.O. Smith over here. So this is 55 decibels, and this is 45 decibels. And decibels are a logarithmic scale, so it's essentially 10 times. Your brain adjusts, so it only feels like 4 times as loud because of the squishiness of our brain's hearing and such. But the upshot of it is that the Ream will sound like it's 4 times as loud as this A.O. Smith model over here on the right. And it's they're 120 volt tanks that are coming out. I'm going to bring that up and put it into the chat for you real quick. A.O. Smith 120 volt heat pump water heater. Let me get this to there it is. A second.
Yeah, up in Northern California here, it may not be the best option yet.
Why is that?
The 120 volt.
Why would that not be a good option?
Well, it doesn't have the horsepower to heat the water as quickly as a 240. So I'm told.
It'll have the same heat pump in it, the same heat pump. What it doesn't have is electric resistance backup.
Right.
So the heat pump is doing the heat pump work. And then really the question comes down to where is it installed? Because if it's pulling heat from the inside of the residence, that's a good thing. It'll always be doing just fine, winter and summer. If it's outside, then it's going to produce less heat in the wintertime. And you would do well to have an 80-gallon tank then, because it'll have days, 4 or 5 days of water storage. So it can heat water up during the day really well when the air is warm, and it won't do it as well at night in the wintertime. But that, I think that if you chose the A.O. Smith Voltex, sorry, here, I meant to be sharing my screen with the other one. New share, I put it into the chat, this product here. So the A.O. Smith Voltex 120 volt, which is in the chat, it's the quiet one, and you just get to choose. Like, I have a tank like this. On Christmas, like on the coldest nights of the year when I have the most demand, I can run out of hot water. But that's it. Like, I just every once in a while in the wintertime, I run out, even though, because it's not working as efficiently because it's cold outside. Every once in a while, it's a problem. But like once or twice a year is not a big thing. I grew up with a 40-gallon tank, 3 siblings, 2 adults, and we ran out of hot water all the time. and so I'm having a much better experience with my kids than I had. And I have a heat pump water heater that, that gets less productive in the wintertime.
Right. Great, thank you. So,
You're welcome.
But there isn't any new developments that will quiet them in total. To understand that,
Well,
depending upon your piping, that you may hear it through the piping itself.
Well, okay, so the A.O. Smith Voltex hybrid means the hybrid is they have electric resistance backup, and A.O. Smith is still much quieter than Rheem is. So, they're pushing their 120 volt products here, but they are also selling their electric resistance hybrid. And so I'll put this into the chat so you can make choices. You're looking for a quiet one, go to A.O. Smith. If you're looking for guaranteed heating no matter what season, what time, because that's what you want, then get an electric resistance hybrid. It'll be 240 volts. They'll take 30 amps. And these other ones are 120 volt and don't take really any amps. They just plug into any old outlet. So it's, you have choices. There's different values that your choices will reflect.
Very good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Now with that, I need to get some dinner, and I have a friend who got COVID from me. And so I've got to go over to her house and take care of her while she's taking a bath.
Getting through it.
Thank you, Sean. I got a lot of good information. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm so glad,
and please email us. I put my email, if you're like, oh, I can't remember this, or I have another question on that, we want to help you in the meantime.
Yeah.
So please reach out. Thank you, guys.
And this was recorded, so the recording will be available on the Climate Reality Orange County YouTube channel.
Excellent.
Yes, and I will reach out to you guys with a quick email too. Thank you so much for such amazing questions.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Tristan.
Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
night. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.